Hey folks, Quill18 here, and welcome to some extra Victoria 2 content. In my Let's Play as Japan, which is going really well, and I'm having a lot of fun with it, and people seem to be responding to it very well, there is a lot of confusion. A lot of people are a little bit overwhelmed by a very complex game, and that includes people who have purchased Victoria 2 and haven't really played it yet because they didn't really know how to play, and then they came to watch Let's Play thinking it would be enough, and they're still a little bit lost. So this is going to be an overview of a few important kind of gameplay topics. This is going to be different from my initial introduction where I mostly talked about my goals as Japan. This we're going to talk about some of the mechanics and just concepts and a bit of a glossary for Victoria 2, so it might make it a little bit easier to follow along. I've loaded a game here as the United States of America, which is actually a really interesting nation to play at this time because, of course, they, well, there's two things. One, we switch to the political map mode down here. You can see they haven't colonized everything. They haven't formed all of the United States. There are some completely uncolonized provinces. Mexico still owns a lot of the US, and Texas is still independent, and we haven't yet had our civil war of the North versus the South. So there's a lot of pretty big events that can happen there, and the United States can be really fun to play. They're also a very big powerhouse in here. They will be a great power throughout the entire game. So that lets you play with a few extra gameplay features which are only available to the great powers. But we'll talk about what that means a little bit later. One of the questions that I've got is, can you play country X? You know, some country. Can you play that country? You can basically play as any country that existed in the game at this time. You can even play as an independent Texas right now because that is its own independent nation. That would be a hard game to play, but it's possible. Some people ask if you could play as Canada. No, because Canada is not an independent nation at this point. However, you could start a game as the United Kingdoms, and then one of the first things you could do is you could grant independence to Canada, and then you would get a pop-up asking you, do you want to keep running the United Kingdom, or do you want to switch over to running Canada? In which case you could switch Canada. Which would be really hard because A, Canada is very underdeveloped at this point, but it also has a fairly low population, which makes it well, not impossible, makes it very difficult to get that ball kind of rolling. It may be much easier to play as the UK for a while longer, encourage immigration to Canada, and then as the population has improved, and as you've spent some money improving the infrastructure in Canada, then break apart as an independent and take over Canada at that point. One of the reasons that Japan, despite being uncivilized at the start of my Let's Play, is going to be pretty good and fun to play is that it has a very high population, also a very high literacy rating. So between the two of them, they can tech up pretty quick and catch up. And in addition to that, the huge amount of population that they have means that they can actually produce a lot of goods, plus field a very large army. So they're going to have a lot of options and a lot of fun there. My apologies about the background noise. So the next thing that we're going to discuss is, oh, right, that's what I wanted to talk about. The political divisions here. So the smallest division is indeed what we call a province in this game. It doesn't map to a province in real life, probably in any way. Here, like, these are provinces. Philadelphia is a province. Pittsburgh is a province. And again, I talked about how in Canada, Sudbury is a province. Well, in reality, these things are actually all cities, although there's a sort of greater region around them. So you can sort of see how it, you know, it works. It's fine. The Sudbury region, the Ottawa region, but it's called a province in the game. And then these are put together in a state, which, again, like Ontario is a state according to this, even though it doesn't really make any sense. It works really well in the United States. So, example, Philadelphia is in the state of Pennsylvania, which is actually what we call that division there. There are also regions, but that's not really going to come into play very much. You can see when I click on a province, I get a lot of details about it. A lot of this is sort of a little too much to look at this point. And one of the big themes in Victoria 2 is there's an incredible amount of complexity and depth, but you don't usually have to deal with it. A lot of different things are automated, especially if you are A, not at war, and B, playing a nation that is at all kind of liberal and capitalist in terms of politics. It mostly runs itself, and you're taking very high-level decisions, so it's easy to ease into it. So I would recommend not playing something that's overly sort of socialist. Play a country to start off with that's very capitalist and very industrialized, and you won't have to deal with a lot of the in-depth economics because capitalists will actually build your factories and your railroads for you, for example, as opposed to a more sort of state capitalism economy, in which case you would be manually building all your factories. So, the most important thing on here is just what the different states produce. And if we switch over to our RGO output, RGO stands for Resource Gathering Operation, and it's what produces your raw goods. So Williamsport produces coal, Harrisburg produces tobacco, and down in the south, of course, we've got plenty of cotton. On the west coast, which we haven't colonized yet, we have a lot of iron, and then like fruit and grain and stuff like that. It's entirely probable, I expect, that at some point there's going to be an event in the game where people discover some gold on the west coast, in which case these resources might change. So the RGOs are responsible for extracting resources from your provinces. And these are mostly raw goods. Some of them can be consumed directly, but others, well, I guess all of them can be consumed directly. But a lot of times you can convert these goods into much higher quality goods, finished goods, by your artisans or your factories. Artisans are, you can imagine artisans like a small business, someone who just set up a workshop and converts timber into, I don't know if you have to go timber into lumber into furniture, or if you can go directly from timber to, we'll look at that. But you can see they start to build things, right? They start to assemble things. Stuff like, even finished good like furniture can then be improved into fine furniture, for example. And these go up the chain. And all of your population, and we're going to look at that in depth, they have a variety of needs. They have life needs. They're very basic things they need to live. So food, mostly, right? And if that's satisfied, then they're going to start looking at everyday needs, which are going to be things like, well, we also would like some tobacco, or something like that. I'm not sure what exactly all the needs are. We'll see when we're in population. I don't have that memorized. It's not that important. And then the next category are your luxury needs, which are the things you just need if you've got a lot of disposable income, and those are going to be your very fancy things. And all of those things make your population happier and happier and happier. If they're very poor and they can't get in their goods, they're going to be miserable. And there's a few other side effects that we're gonna look at. So the rest of this we're mostly going to leave off at this point, and we may come back and talk about it once we've looked at some of the fundamental concepts in the menus. But you can mouse over everything as well. There's lots of hints, lots of tooltips. So let's take a look at the production menu. And here already we're seeing more evidence of this kind of complexity. But again, we may not have to deal with this directly. In fact, these buttons here, these are buttons you use to build new factories. They're grayed out. I literally cannot build a factory because my political system doesn't allow it. Instead, capitalists are responsible for building new factories. So I actually don't have to think about it. Whereas if I was playing it with a different type of government, and maybe in a different country, then it would be my responsibility. Sometimes you get the in-between. Capitalists can build it, and also the state can build them. Sometimes only capitalists, sometimes only the state. All kinds of different things like that. But we can see, first of all, factories get built at a state level, not at a provincial level. So all of Massachusetts has 2 factories somewhere in there. It's not a per province level. We've got a canned food factory, and we've got a glass factory. So glass requires an input of coal, which it's not getting its demand of right now. It's in red, and it produces glass. It produces glass goods. If we look at, is it production? I thought there was a good way to get a map. There probably is, I'm just not seeing it right now. But there you go. So it turns coal into glass. And in the canned goods factory, we take iron, cattle, fish, grain, and we process all these things and produce a variety of canned goods, which are then either sold to our population, right, to meet some of their needs, which are sold internationally to allow our various factories and artisans to make money, which we will then collect in taxes. And it could also be stockpiled for us, in which case it might feed our troops and things like that. There's different ways the goods can flow. And generally speaking, these things just sort of, you can imagine, just get sold on a kind of a global market, and then the people who need it buy it, including ourselves, if we need some of these goods to maybe, again, feed our troops or something like that. We've got cement factories, which take coal, produce cement, which are then used to build and maintain additional factories, and so on and so forth. Really can't scroll this list. I'm wondering if we had a different government and we could see all the places where we didn't have factories. That's entirely possible. There's a few different things we can do here. We can subsidize factories and different stuff, but that's a little bit above and beyond. We can also invest in countries that are part of our sphere, places we have a lot of influence. That's beyond the scope of this. Production shows you everything you're producing, and again, you don't necessarily have to involve yourself in this if it's just coming out a little too complex, but you can get an idea as to what your country is producing, what it isn't producing. Maybe that'll give you ideas for new factories to build or places to expand. And then our capitalists are currently building railroads in New York. That's our production menu. Not a whole lot for us to interact with here. One of the ones we will interact with very frequently is the budget window. So the budget window is divided into two major sides. Way up here, we've got our income from taxes. We've got our population divided by poor, middle, and rich classes. So the rich are the aristocracy and the capitalist. Middle class, you've got your artisans, bureaucrats, clergymen, clerks, and officers. And finally, the poor, you've got craftsmen who work in factories. You've got farmers who work certain types of RGOs, laborers who work other types of RGOs. So farmers will get your grain and tobacco, and laborers will get your iron and coal, for example. We have slaves, and they also work RGOs, I believe, but I don't think they work it as efficiently. And finally, we have soldiers. So all these are different categories. Our soldiers, we also have officers and regular soldiers as well. Oh no, I guess officers were here. So we can tax all these people. We can choose how different strata get taxed. And this has some pretty serious implications about how much spending money they have, how they can meet their needs. In fact, if we mouse over here, you can see that right now in our middle tax bracket, and it may be because the game hasn't advanced. It'd be interesting to see if we unpause it and let it run what would happen here. But 50% of our middle class are currently not getting any of their needs. 41% or 10% are getting their life needs at a minimum, and then 41% are getting their everyday needs, which is their life needs plus their everyday needs. So that's not going so well. The rich are really awesome. Almost all of them have their everyday needs, and only a handful of them don't have that. None of them have their luxury needs, which is too bad. In fact, our poor, a lot of them actually have their luxury needs. They have less demand for it, though. They need less things to kind of satisfy themselves. Over on the bottom here, we have debt, which we can take out loans. This also happens automatically. If we run out of money in our treasury and we're running a negative balance, we'll automatically take out loans to not go bankrupt. There's a maximum sort of amount of loans you can take out, and if you hit that point, and it depends on a lot of factors for your nation. I don't know if we click this, can we see? No, we can just take out an arbitrary loan for any amount. If you hit that maximum and you're still at a deficit, then you can go bankrupt, which cancels your loans but kind of screws you in other ways. Over here we've got our expenses. Things like education, administration, social spending are kind of obvious. Like education, well, it's weird because it's not a direct thing. This is basically how much we pay our clergymen, who are responsible for educating our populace and giving our literacy and improving our research rates. The higher this goes, the more we pay them, but it also encourages more people to become clergymen. So this will go up in time as we get more and more clergymen, but there's a benefit to that, right? In that, well, having more clergymen is good. Same thing with administration. The higher it goes, the more we are paying our bureaucrats, so the more people will become bureaucrats. And there's different ways to fiddle with that. Social spending, right now we don't have any social spending programs like unemployment insurance or pensions, but if we did, we would control it here. Military spending is simply how much we pay our various officers. And again, this influences how many people become those soldiers. Now, what's interesting is that these are not necessarily soldiers that exist on the map. For example, here is the current U.S. Army. It is a whopping, it's 4 regiments, I guess. Each have 3,000 men. So we have a 12,000 man army here. These are not all my soldiers. We have more that are sort of sitting around like at home in their bases. They haven't been mobilized. They haven't been assigned to a unit yet. And we would do that in our military screen, which we'll get to soon enough, where we build the military units out of those soldiers. Now, if we have cut the spending on our military considerably, soldiers aren't getting paid much, people are going to stop being soldiers, and instead they're going to become craftsmen or something like that. And then when we try to mobilize an army and try to build units, we're going to have a hard time doing that. So it's kind of interesting, but at the same time, you could cut it back dramatically. If we are actively at war, this military spending goes up a lot because you just have to spend more for your units. The national stockpile, we will talk about a little bit more when we get to trade. But basically, we are constantly using goods as the nation, as the government. There's certain supplies that we need. If we are building a factory directly as opposed to capitalists, well, we will need to buy things. We also need to buy certain things to maintain our standing army, because we have to give them guns and clothes and that sort of thing. If we are building new military units, then we really have to buy quite a lot, because it's not just a maintenance level at that point. It is we are needing to buy up, say, all the parts that are necessary to build a boat or cannons or something like that. And that comes out of our national stockpile budget. And the amount spent here fluctuates dramatically based on what we're doing. At 100%, we're just buying stuff as quickly as we can. We could cut back if we need to kind of balance that out, little things like that. And ultimately, so this is how much you're spending, this is how much you're bringing in, and this is our net balance. So we're doing really good here in that we're in the positive. We can also affect tariffs, which are for all these goods that go in and out of our nation. Whenever something comes into our nation, if we have a tariff on it, like of 25%, if someone is buying, I don't know, canned goods from outside the country, and a canned good costs, I don't know, 10 pounds. Everything is in pounds in this game, just because it's Victoria. The UK were the dominant force at this time, so they just are using pounds everywhere as the currency, just to sort of unify everything, right? Obviously, every country has their own currency, but it's all being converted. So if a unit of canned goods costs 10 pounds, then we are actually going to add 25% to that price, and the person buying the canned goods would actually have to spend 12 pounds 50 to purchase those canned goods, and the extra 2.5 pounds would go to the government. So it's a great way for us to raise money, but it means that it's much, much harder for the population to meet their needs. Furthermore, for someone like an artisan, are they not represented here? Oh, right here. Someone who's an artisan, which is someone who takes a good and converts it into something else. So someone might have to buy coal internationally because we don't have enough produced locally, so they're going to have to buy coal locally or internationally to turn that into glassware. Well, if we have a 25% tariff on there, they may not be able to do that at a profit, in which case these artisans are basically going to go broke, and they're going to have to become something else. They'll also be very miserable and whining in the meantime. We could actually flip it the other way around and run a subsidy, where we are going to make international goods cheaper by actually spending money out of our treasury to do that. And there's all sorts of negative possible things happening there beyond just the fact that we're spending more money. And so where you put your tariffs is going to have some pretty significant impact on your economy and on your industry, all these types of things. Usually you can run a little bit of a positive tariff, 10% or so doesn't usually have much of an impact doesn't usually break your economy. So, but you're going to have to play that on a case-by-case basis. So next tab, technology. You can do research. There are 5 broad categories: Army, Navy, Commerce, Culture, Industry, and in each one of those broad categories there are 5 sort of subgroupings, and these happen in a chain. You need basic chemistry before you can go to medicine, before you can go to inorganic chemistry, and so on and so forth. More confusingly, while this is a broad sort of level of research, inside of that, there are a variety of inventions. So medicine by itself, if we were to research that, would give us a 25% higher supply limit. But then it unlocks a variety of inventions that may trigger at any given time, which have additional bonuses. So combat medicine would lower army attrition by 5% and give us a 1% bonus to military hospitals, for example. And depending on what other technologies you have, so it has a base chance of being discovered every month? Every week, every day, I'm not sure, 2%. But if we researched Army professionalism and military statistics, which would be over here, Army professionalism, military statistics, it would increase that chance each by 2%, so we would discover combat medicine